Spade back here with you, High Noon Leatherworks, for another leather adventure. And today is going to be part 2 and the conclusion of the leather Coozie holder. And if you go take a look at the last video, we did the pattern and cut out the leather for the can, 12-ounce can. And today we're going to wrap this up, and I'll show you how I'm going to do that. So come on in and let's get started. What I'm going to do is go ahead and take my leather that's been cut out from the pattern that we made, and if you go check out that last video, which is the pattern of the leather Coozie, you'll see how we made that pattern. And then what I did in that last video was go ahead and take a 12-ounce can after I cut out my leather and then make sure that it was going to work. And it's going to work just fine. The only thing is once I get this stitched up, then I'm going to have to trim off the excess. So I'll show you how I'm going to do that also. But the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to center this can, and I'm going to pull my leather up on each side, and then I'm just going to wrap that around like so. And you could stitch it like that, or you could stitch it like this. Now if you stitch it like that with a seam on the outside, obviously you're going to have a seam when you grab a hold of it. If you stitch it like this, where you wrap it around, then you're not going to have that big seam sticking out. So I'm not sure, haven't made up my mind exactly how I'm going to do this yet. I think what I might do is go ahead and try doing one of each type and then figuring out how I want to do it in the end. But for the video, for this video, I like the looks of the wraparound better than I do the seam that's going to stick out. But I think on this first one, I think I'm going to do the seam that sticks out, and let's see what it looks like. I just think, I don't know, maybe it'd look better that way. I'm not sure, since it's the first one I've done. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold both sides, squeeze both sides like this, nice and tight, and I'm going to make a reference mark on both sides of my leather, just with a stylus at the top. So you can see I made a little reference mark there and there. And then what I can do is I'll go ahead and measure that, since I know this is square, because it's 5.5 inches across. So I'm going to go ahead and measure that. That is 5/8 of an inch. And that's where I'm going to put my stitching line, is at 5/8. So I'll take my stylus, take my straight edge, put it on that 5/8 of an inch mark, and I'm just going to make a reference point where my stitching holes go. Again, I'm just using a stylus for that, and it does push down into this leather, so I'm not going to groove it or anything. We'll do the same on the other side of the pattern, the piece of leather. We'll go 5/8, and I'll mark it. So there's the other side. So now I've got that reference point. I'll go ahead and use a couple of small spring clamps to clamp that together so I can keep those two pieces clamped together. I'll take my can, slide it in from the other side, and again I'm going to have to push that in because I want to spread that side out that I've already got marked before I squeeze this side together. And I want to make sure my can's good and flat on the bottom. So I'll pull that together just like I did the other side. And remember, I want this pretty snug. I can always moisten this leather up a little bit and push that can down in there later after I stitch it. And then I'll go ahead, make my reference point on this side, and take my clamps off. Let me measure, and it's 5/8 on this side too, so I've got it centered. And I could have just measured that on the other side, but then I wouldn't know for sure if I had the can exactly centered. So let's go ahead and make that scribed line. We'll do 5/8 on the other piece. And if anything, I want it a little snug. I don't want it loose. I don't want my can just rattling around in there. So there's my marks on both sides for my stitching holes. So I'll take my poly board and take me a scrap piece of leather, lay it on my poly board, get my mallet, and get my stitching punch. I'm using a 4-prong. And this burgundy colored pre-dyed leather that I'm using, again from Kentucky Leather and Hides, is nice and soft. Probably about 6 ounce. So I'll do that side, move over to this side, and it punches really easy. So it's real easy to work with. And then I'll put one more then I can go ahead and turn this around, fold it over, and what I'll do is I'll take my 2-prong punch, make sure that the top is even on both pieces, and then I'll take my first 2 holes. The key is making sure it's very even so that when I stitch it, it looks good. And I'll put that in the first 2 holes, tap on it a couple times, and then double check it on the other side. I want to make sure I'm on the same groove line, so I don't want to go all the way through. I'm just tapping it to see where I come out. And I'm in good shape. I just tapped it enough to where they just barely poke through. Now I know I'm on that line. I could go ahead and go all the way through to the other side, pull that out. Now I have my reference starting point on the other side. So flip it around. I'm going to do the same thing on the second side here. So now I have my reference point on both sides, where to start. So I can flip it over, grab my 4-prong punch again, and start in those first 2 holes. And punch this side. You could punch both sides at the same time. It just seems to me, in my experience, it's a little more difficult punching through 2 thicknesses of leather, and then you have to try to pull that back out. Sometimes it makes it a little more difficult. It's my opinion. There's that one. We'll move to the other side. And then just move on down that scored seam that you put on there with your stylus. Until we get to the end. So now I've got both ends punched with my stitching holes and both sides. So now I'm ready to go stitch this. I'm going to stitch it with a saddle stitch by hand. I think I'm going to use black. I think it'll look good on there. And I'm going to stitch this off camera, and then I'll be back and show you what I'm going to do from there. Alright, I'm back, and I've done my saddle stitching on both sides. And then I just terminated it at the bottom on each side by going through my last hole to the inside and then tying a knot. And then I always like to burn that termination knot, the loose ends, since I'm using artificial wax sinew, and that'll get rid of that last bit there on the end, and I'll seal that last knot up so it can't come undone. So the next thing I need to do is, you can see, and I talked about this earlier, but you can see how much extra I have out there, and obviously I don't need that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave just a little bit there, and I'm going to cut the rest of that off. Now, obviously, I have to be very careful not to cut my stitching. So normally I would put my straight edge on the fat side, or the side that has the most material, but I'm going to try to do it on the side that has the part I want to cut off. And the reason why is because I want to be able to see my stitching. So let me turn this so you can see what I'm doing here. So I'm going to leave approximately 1/8 of an inch, and I'm going to, this again is softer leather, so I'm going to go real slow. I'm not going to try to cut through everything at one time. And you can see it pop up. So I got through it. So there's my excess that I cut off. Let me take a look at my stitch. It looks really good on both sides. So I've just got about 1/8 of an inch from the edge to my stitching. I want to leave enough. I don't want to pull that out if I go stretching on this. So I'll turn it over, do the other side the same way. Again, I'm not going to get in any hurry. I'll make several passes and make sure I get a nice straight cut. And there it just popped up. So there's my excess again. And then there's the finished side. You can see I've got a real nice edge here. And I think what I'm going to do is I'll take my smaller beveler and I'll bevel that real quick so it doesn't have a sharp edge on it. And again, it doesn't have to have a big bevel on it or anything. I'm just taking that sharp edge off where I cut it, and I'll show you as soon as I finish that what it looks like. So just quickly bevel that. Now, if you wanted to go further than that, you could go ahead and burnish that edge if you wanted, coat it with something, whatever you want to do. But you can see now I've got a nice beveled edge on there instead of a hard sharp edge. So now let's see, I've got my finished edges, I've got all my stitching done. Let's stick my fingers in there and I press down on that seam with my thumbs from the outside. Make sure that that is stretched out enough, and we'll see if this can will slide in there. Now we want it snug, and it is super snug. So could I get it to go over that? Yeah, I could, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to form this, I'm going to wet form it to a 12-ounce can. So that will make it slide over the can because it'll give the leather a little bit of pliability, and then it's going to, as it dries, it's going to put a memory in this so that when I pull the can out, it's going to hold that shape, and that can, another can will slide in and out of it nice and tight, but not so tight that you have to force it in there. You should be able just to slide it in, pull it out, but it's not going to fall off either. So I'm going to go get this wet and I'll be back. Alright, so I ran it under warm water in the sink and got the leather nice and wet, and then push the can down in it, and it is a snug fit, but that's what I want. I want to make sure it's all the way down to the bottom, so it does sit, the can sits on the bottom piece, and you can see the can through there, and it is nice and snug in there. And I'll let that sit probably overnight. It'll dry quicker than that probably, but I'm going to let it sit overnight, and then I can pull that can out. And probably the easiest way to pull that can out is to actually pop the top and let the pressure off the can, and then push the can out. So it was very snug, which is what I wanted. I wanted it nice and snug. Now here's the thing. These koozies like this out of leather, I found definitely, well, most koozies are like this, but bottles are going to be one size. Some cans are smaller in diameter than others. This is a standard 12-ounce can, like a Pepsi or a Coke. So any standard 12-ounce can will fit in this just fine. If I wanted to make one for a bottle, then I'd have to make a different one so that it fits snug to that bottle, because the diameter of the bottle is smaller. So standard 12-ounce can, leather koozie, nice and snug. You can see where it's already drying. It's lightening up. It's already starting to dry. So I'll let that sit overnight, and I'll have me a nice wet molded koozie. Thanks for coming along. Thanks for sharing this time with me on this video. We've got a completed koozie out of leather, and I think it's going to be real handy. So just another project in the books. So come along with me next week and check out the next video. We'll start a new project. I think you're going to like it. It's going to be something never done before, so I'm going to be doing it for the first time. So come and check it out. I would appreciate it. Please hit that subscribe button if you haven't subscribed. Please hit the like if you liked, and please hit the notification bell so you get notifications every time I post a video. And again, thank you for coming along, and as I always say, please like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.